Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, February 10th. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. In a dramatic and unexpected decision, the Jerusalem Magistrates Court today slapped an additional one-month sentence on former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and rejected his plea bargain to reduce jail time by overlapping sentences. Today's decision will send the former Jerusalem mayor to a total of 19 months behind bars, and includes the 18-month jail sentence he received on charges of bribery in the Holy Land affair. Olmert is due to start serving his prison term in 5 days' time. In summing up the decision, Judge Avital Chen said the reasons aimed at convincing the court that the jail sentences should overlap were inadequate. In the January 18th plea bargain, Olmert admitted to obstruction of justice in the Talansky affair and the Holy Land affair in exchange for a reduced prison sentence. Olmert's lawyer said the former prime minister was disappointed with today's ruling. The government intends to surround Israel with a security fence that will protect it against the wild beasts in the region. These words from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who spoke while touring the eastern security barrier under construction along the Jordanian border. A stretch of 5 kilometers of the 30-kilometer fence that was approved by the cabinet in September has already been completed. The cost of the fence, which is also designed to safeguard the airport being built in Timna outside of Eilat, is an estimated 288 million shekels. Netanyahu said the advantage of building the fences along the Jordanian and Egyptian borders is that there are no structures located in close proximity to that barrier that could be used to hide tunnels. This is not the case along the Gaza border and even in Judea and Samaria, where structures are built adjacent to the security barrier, he said. Minister of Transportation Yisrael Katz, Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, and the head of the Army's Southern Command accompanied the Prime Minister on his tour. Diplomatic talks between the European Union and Israel are reportedly taking place with the aim of amending strained relations triggered by the EU's decision to label Israeli products made beyond the Green Line. Diplomatic sources say the EU is reportedly offering Israel compensation in order to resume its involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While there has been no official confirmation of this from the Israelis or the European officials, diplomatic sources in Jerusalem confirmed the sides were jointly discussing ways to work towards restoring ties. Several months ago, Jerusalem suspended diplomatic dialogue with the EU and barred them from getting involved in the advancing peace talks with the Palestinians to protest Brussels' decision to publish legislation guidelines that allow member states to label products made in Judea and Samaria. Israeli and Turkish negotiation teams are set to meet again in Geneva tomorrow as part of ongoing efforts to bridge the gaps and restore diplomatic ties between the two countries. Israeli officials say that while progress has been made, 2 hurdles remain. Ankara's demand that Israel ends its blockade of the Gaza Strip, open up the border with Gaza, and Jerusalem's demand that Turkey put an end to the Hamas presence in the capital. Hamas official Salah al-Ai, one of the masterminds of the abduction and murder of 3 Israeli teens in June 2014, has set up offices in Ankara and continues to collect funds and plot additional attacks against Israel. Ties between the two countries reached an all-time low following the Israeli raid on a flotilla seeking to break Israel's blockade on Gaza in May 2010, in which 9 activists were killed. Well, joining us now in the studio is Gerald Steinberg, professor of political science from Bar-Ilan University and founder and president of NGO Monitor, an advocacy group that tracks the work of non-governmental organizations critical of Israel. So, Professor Steinberg, let's start with the Jordanian border and what happened yesterday with the Prime Minister. He says that Israel has to put fences up to protect us from the wild beasts. Is that in the best interest of Israel's national security?
We're in a very strange, unusual, I would say unique regional situation, in the sense that across the borders, what we see in Syria, what we see in Egypt, what we see in Iraq, and it changes periodically. There's a lot of violence. Sinai is now largely occupied. Maybe that's not the right term, but there are Al-Qaeda forces in there, and they're using Sinai to attack, trying to get through. Jordan is also part of that. So what I see from the Prime Minister and from the Chief of Staff of the IDF and others is a policy, a general policy. Not only they went to see, and it was very photogenic to be filmed along the quietest border, along with Jordan, but as the Prime Minister said, we need to protect ourselves. We need to realize that across of every border, we have problems with the regimes and their inability, even if they wanted to maintain those borders to be stable, not to have infiltrations. certainly can't happen in Egypt, and we worry about what happens across in Jordan as well. So that's the general policy, to seal all of Israel's borders with physical barriers, with fences.
It's a bit of a ghetto mentality. I mean, why Jordan? We have excellent relations with the military of Jordan. Why do you think we need a barrier there?
I think in general, specifically in this era, everybody needs to have the ability to control immigration, and not just immigration, but prevent terrorists from coming in. Yes, the relations with the Jordanian, not only the royal family and the government, but also with the military are extremely close and coordinated. But that doesn't mean that there are not going to be incidents that take place where you could have the infiltration, and that's happened before across the Jordan border. Everybody makes mistakes, and so in order to be able to have that extra bit of insurance, let's have all those borders protected.
Let's move on to the European Union. Professor, what do you make of these reports that Israel and the European Union are trying to reconcile their differences?
I think it makes sense. It certainly rings true with what I see when I go to Brussels, when I talk to Israeli officials. You talked about in your news summary, and you showed images of the fact that the fight was very sharp over the issue of product labeling.
Right.
And that took place a number of months ago, where Israel felt very much like it was a victim of a surprise attack in some ways. That's part of a political war. It's related to the boycott movement, BDS. And Israel felt very much that there were forces within the European Union driving this process, one-sided, only Israel. Other countries, other areas where there are occupied territories like Cyprus or the Western Sahara, other places where there are conflicts, there the European Union doesn't have a product labeling policy. It's not, and it's more than that. It's the constant attacks against Israel, which are seen as one-sided, ill-informed, and the area that I focus a lot on, all of this European money, government money, that's being used to influence Israeli politics and to promote the image of Israel as guilty of war crimes around the world, all these NGOs. So these are all on the agenda. So what Israel did, the Netanyahu government, the foreign ministry, said, we're going to suspend our cooperation with Europe on the peace process.
They played hardball with the Europeans.
Well, somewhat hardball.
Yeah.
A little bit increase the Israeli assertion of rights and of having been
But it seems to have
unfairly
worked. I mean, they want to talk now. But let me ask you a question about the BDS. And how did the European labeling of the products from Judea and Samaria affect the BDS movement?
It's BDS light. We're going to start, and I'm very clear about that, the NGOs that are driving this process. You've got a group called the European Council on Foreign Relations, which is really an NGO. And you've got groups like Who Profits. You've got lots of groups out there in Europe that are promoting this BDS process. Let's start with product labeling in the West Bank. And the next move, and they say it very clearly, and they wanted to do this already this month. It was slowed down. What else is going on the West Bank? Israeli banks. Every Israeli bank gives mortgages. They have branches in Ma'ale Adumim, they have them in Katzrin, not just the West Bank, but in what they call occupied territory, also within East Jerusalem. All those pieces are together. So first you start with product labeling, and then what they call differentiation, which is a fancy word for not such like BDS. We're going to differentiate between what goes on within the pre-67, 1949 armistice lines and everything else. And that, since there's no distinction, if you have a boycott on Bank Hapoalim or Bank Beinlaumi Arishon or any of the other banks that are there, these are national banks, and that's clearly designed to shut down or to do real damage to the entire Israeli economy.
Let me ask you something. You mentioned about European funding to the NGOs here in Israel, and NGO Monitor is the one that's monitoring all this funding. How is it impacting, and where is it impacting?
The funding or the monitoring? Or
no,
both,
not
maybe?
the monitoring, the funding from Europe.
There are a number of different areas. We just talked about the BDS movement, and those NGOs are leading the push for different forms of sanctions and product labeling and boycotts. We see it among church divestment groups now. Recently in the United States, the Methodists joined the Presbyterians. We see it on college campuses, the image of Israel as a country of war criminals. That's all we see and hear in many of the campuses. Those are all led by European-funded NGOs. Some Israeli, like Breaking the Silence and B'Tselem, some Palestinians, like Al-Haq and Al-Mazan, and some are international European, based in Europe, like Amnesty and the French version of Amnesty, which is FIDH. So that campaign has done a lot of damage to Israel.
What do you make of this controversial transparency bill that's being passed by the Knesset?
Well, first of all, it's in the process, and I think we have a few months to come up with a better alternative, and I think there is a better alternative. I think that one doesn't have to have what are limitations through legislation in every situation. But rather, I have proposed, and we've seen some movement towards this, negotiated guidelines between, let's say, members of the Israeli Knesset. It can be government to government, but I think perhaps it would work better where you have a group of members of the Knesset from different parties. So they represent a broad Israeli consensus, negotiating guidelines with the European counterparts. No anti-Semitism. We, the European Union, will prevent giving funding to groups that are engaged in any form of anti-Semitism. Believe it or not, they don't have such a guideline, and some of the money that goes to groups under the heading of promoting peace or democracy get involved in some very nasty anti-Semitic activities.
But what do you say to those
who one of many criteria.
Well, what do you say to those who say that this is discriminatory against left-wing groups against Israel?
First of all, they have a point in the sense that it's also discriminatory because no European government gives any money to any NGO other than left-wing groups. And in fact, there have been some applications and attempts, and maybe now the Europeans are beginning to give to women's groups that are not involved in politics and forcing an end to the occupation in their language and other things. That's been a real hole in it. There's a lot of private money going both to the left and to the right. That also needs to be monitored, but it's different than government money. Okay. So this debate that we're having in Israel on European government money should not be the end of the debate, but rather the beginning, where there should also be some greater discussion about the impact of all this money that's coming in for political groups, for left and for right, for ultra-Orthodox and ultra-secular. We are very permeated as a society, I think more than any other democracy, by foreign funding coming into playing in our political field. And that's something that needs to be looked at in some more detail.
Well, Professor Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor and Bar-Ilan University, thanks so much for joining IBA.
Thank you, Ari.
The condition of 28-year-old Tomer Ditor, who was stabbed yesterday near the community of Neve Daniel in Gush Etzion, is improving, and he is expected to be released from the Shaarei Tzedek hospital in the coming days. Ditor was out jogging when he was stabbed in the head and shoulders by a Palestinian assailant who managed to flee the scene. Despite his injuries, Ditor continued to the entrance of the community and alerted security forces. A manhunt continues for the terrorist, who is believed to have fled to the nearby Palestinian village of Nahalin. IDF forces set up roadblocks in the area and are conducting searches in the nearby Arab village. Reports out of Syria allege Israeli Air Force jets bombed Hezbollah and Syrian army targets northeast of Damascus before dawn yesterday. Syrian opposition forces claim the Israeli aircraft struck Hezbollah targets in the mountainous Kalamoun region near the border with Lebanon and near the town of Kataifa. Lebanese media reported at least 5 strikes were conducted on Hezbollah targets, including weapons strongholds that house Scud-D and Scud-C ballistic missiles. Israel has not responded to the reports, but Hezbollah's Al-Manar satellite station denied the story, saying no Syrian army bases or Hezbollah positions were attacked by Israel in the past. In the past, foreign media reports have claimed Israel struck Hezbollah positions and weapon convoys in Syria as part of an effort to prevent Hezbollah from obtaining game-changing weaponry. Doctors are threatening to wage a nationwide strike in protest of the high occupancy rate and overcrowded conditions they are forced to deal with at hospitals across the country. Physicians are warning that occupancy levels in all the hospitals have exceeded the limit, and that without additional staff and funding, patients are unlikely to receive the desired care and attention. Doctors stress that in some cases, patients' lives could be jeopardized due to the situation. The investigation into last night's fatal car crash in the Negev, in which 3 men in their 20s were killed, continues. The 3 victims were all members of the same family from the Bedouin village of Hura. 4 passengers also suffered head injuries in the collision, which occurred on Highway 31 near the Shoket junction in the Negev. Initial findings revealed that one of the cars exceeded the speed limit and apparently lost control and collided with a car in the opposite direction. Ohad Ben Ishai, the soldier who was critically wounded during Operation Protective Edge in the summer of 2014, has been released from hospital after an 18-month-long recovery period. Ben Ishai suffered severe head injuries in the Battle of Sajaiya inside Gaza. Since then, he was treated at the Sheba Medical Center, where he had to learn everything from scratch: how to speak, walk, read, and write. The hospital hosted a going-home party for the joyous patient, attended by dozens of his close friends, family, and medical staff. Holding back the tears, Ben Ishai's father, Shimon, thanked the devoted team of doctors and nurses, whom he said played a tremendous role in his son's rehabilitation, and accommodated the family's home away from home for the past year and a half. The annual International Tourism Exhibition is wrapping up today in Tel Aviv. Organized by the Ministry of Tourism, the event showcases exhibitors representing just about every aspect of the country's tourism market, including incoming, domestic, and outgoing tourism. Dozens of exhibitors from around the world arrive to showcase their attractions, encourage Israelis to experience their sites and cities. Minister of Tourism Yariv Levin stressed that despite reports of a decline of nearly 18% in tourism to Israel from 2 years ago, Israel is still a #1 destination for international travelers.
Israel is an excellent destination for every tourist. We have here everything from ancient cities, from culture and history, to beaches, sun, great culinary, and I think that we have a lot of things we can offer to every tourist that comes here. Israel is one of the safest destinations in the world, and I can assure every tourist to come here, you will be so surprised, so happy, you will enjoy it here, you will have a lifetime of experience, and you'll come back home in the end safe and sound.
It's Wednesday, and for the next month, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals will be holding Furry Wednesdays, a special drive aimed at improving the treatment of man's best friend. I visited the SPCA in Jaffa and filed this report. It's hard not to fall in love at first sight with these furry little beasts. With their puppy eyes and their feline purrs, they're full of excitement with human contact, hoping they'll be taken home to a loving owner. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Tel Aviv knows adoption is just the beginning and have launched free lectures to help cat and dog owners.
And then we have, of course, a psychologist for cats. Believe it or not, cats need also sometimes a psychologist.
So people coming to are going to get a whole variety of expertise.
Yes. 5 weeks in a row, every Wednesday at 7 o'clock in the evening. Free of charge.
This series is also intended for those considering adopting a new four-legged friend.
People also, especially obviously owners of dogs and cats, but also other people who are interested in cats, interested in dogs, or maybe will think about, maybe this is an opportunity to learn about a dog and cat world and get a little bit of real knowledge of both health problems or health maintenance, which is one of the most important things, health maintenance. It's a really good idea to come and learn a little bit about this and hopefully adopt a dog from us.
They are an open shelter, taking all animals brought to them, be they strays or given up by their owners. It's been there since the late 1920s, the oldest pet protection society in Israel and the largest in the country.
It started with taking care of camels, believe me, and then horses, and then cats and dogs. And anyone who doesn't want anymore for whatever reason, their cat or dog, without any question, we will accept them and we try to find new homes for them.
Located in Jaffa at 159 Herzl Street, volunteers come and walk the dogs and give them human contact until they are adopted. Anyone who adopts a dog or cat knows they're getting a healthy animal with all its shots, spayed or castrated, and with an electronic chip. Veterinarian Dr. Sharon Kanani says more and more Arabs and religious people are adopting pets now.
There is a trend now also of Arab Israelis that are very responsible, very loving owners, and especially I've seen them adopt cats, but also dogs. More people that are more Masortim, so more conservative people, also coming in and getting into knowing what it is to have a pet.
They operate by the responsible adoption method, interviewing the families to make sure to fit the right temperament animal with their needs.
Otherwise, they can come back, these dogs, and they get traumatized because, it's still a dog. There's very sensitive, animals, and they get attached.
The lectures are free, but you're welcome to bring a donation or pet food for the animals. You never know. It might lead to the beginning of a wonderful friendship. In local money matters, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange was mixed today, while the shekel was also mixed in foreign currency trading. Here are the late afternoon numbers. Taking a look at the weather, and tomorrow is expected to be partly cloudy with chances of rain in the morning. Here are the forecasted highs and lows at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. That's all for today. I'll be back again at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest news from Israel. I'm Mario O'Sullivan. Thanks for watching. Shalom from Jerusalem. And we leave you with footage of rafting on the Jordan River.